we're just a couple of months away from the federal election, and the big question on everyone's lips is, can Scott Morrison repeat his miracle ScoMo, the miracle ScoMo's 2019 election win? The signs are mixed. The handling of the pandemic, or rather the obfuscation of responsibilities to power-hungry state leaders, have frustrated many Conservatives, as well as his unwillingness to fight the culture wars, as you know if you watch this show. Well, Spectator author Rocco Loiacono has partnered with Augusto Zimmerman, who you also read in The Spectator, and you saw recently here on Outsiders. They've released a book reflecting critically on the Prime Minister's time in office. They call it Deconstructing ScoMo. Rocco, great to see you. How are you?
Good morning, Ron. Thank you for having me.
So, Rocco, tell us about your book. You're Deconstructing ScoMo. So we're going to urge people to rush out and buy the book. You'll give us the details in a second. But come on, deconstruct ScoMo for us, Rocco.
Okay. Well, James, you were talking earlier about rewriting history after courts have been striking down and states have been revoking vaccine mandates. Well, we wanted to make sure that there's an historical record of Morrison's statements, of his actions, and also his inactions, because he flip-flops so constantly. We wanted to demonstrate just how devoid of principles he is, and make sure that is not airbrushed in history. We wanted to deconstruct him from that perspective to make sure that Australians, when they go to vote, actually have this information before them and that it's not airbrushed. The book covers a wide range of issues, not just the pandemic response. And we also wanted to demonstrate, particularly for people thinking about which way to vote, particularly if they're Conservatives. As you said, Ron, he's upset so many Conservatives. Wanted to put on the record quite possibly why he's never really believed in Conservative ideals and why this is the case over the course of his Prime Ministership.
Rita.
Well, what does he believe in then? I mean, why would someone enter politics if they have no convictions, they have no ideology, they have no belief system?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it, Rita? And, I mean, this is the thing. The question that's often asked is, well, look, what alternative is there? We have to keep the ALP out because of the Liberals are actually 1% better. Well, people who read this book will realise that, look, in our view, that perspective is no longer tenable. We need the Liberals to actually go back to their Conservative roots and find people with ideology, with Conservative ideals, and with principles that people can look up to, and people who will actually believe in the Enlightenment direction that this country held until recently that made it so prosperous, and what made people like my parents want to come here and live here and make their lives here. And this doesn't, we're not advocating by any means a vote for the ALP. Those who read the book will see that Augusto and I are no friends of the ALP. But look, if people want another 3 years of windsock and windbag style government, this book hopefully will convince you otherwise. Sorry, James.
I was going to say, Rocco, one of the things that I think annoyed so many Conservative voters out there and an awful lot of Outsiders viewers was when the day that he said ScoMo said there's no jobs in fighting for free speech. And he said again and again he's just refused to take on culture issues and, in fact, given more money to the ABC. My reading of this is that this has created a really damaging enthusiasm gap. His base is not enthusiastic, and we're already seeing this happening in a lot of the campaigns in a lot of seats where they're just having trouble getting people to come out and do things. Is the practical consequence of his failure to embrace the base an alienated base that's going to have trouble getting him over the line in the election?
In our view, I think that's absolutely correct, James. I mean, John Howard once said it's better to be right than popular. And I mean, obviously, he had the media against him and he had a lot of enemies within his own party. But in the end, he was proved right and became our second longest serving Prime Minister and one of our greatest Prime Ministers. I mean, ScoMo has done everything to try and pander to ideology politics, including using disgracefully parliamentary privilege to trash the presumption of innocence. He's thrown ministers under the bus to do it, and that's why you're seeing such a lack of enthusiasm from the base. I mean, worse than doing nothing is actually doing the wrong thing, and that's what the Conservative base is seeing in ScoMo, and that's why they're so unenthusiastic. I mean, the other thing is too, we want also to send not just the Liberals a message, but the major parties a message. And in Australia, we've got a historical precedent for this. I mean, from 1955 to 1972, you had a significant, so we call them conservative, minority of voters cast their vote neither for the coalition nor for the Labor Party in B.A. Santa Maria's DLP. And that had significant policy outcomes and indeed saved the coalition's skin on more than one occasion. Now, since the 1990s, we've seen Green politics pull the ALP to the left and the Liberals with them. And it's time for somebody, and there are conservative alternatives out there, and we want people to think about this very carefully, to pull the Liberals back to the base, back to their conservative roots and back to the right, where they belong.
Isn't the problem there's too many? It's fractured. You've got Liberal Democrats, you've got One Nation, you've got Palmer United. That conservative vote that's disenfranchised is not going to one spot, so that party can have a significant influence and pull the Liberals back to the right.
Well, this is where I think what Rowan's theory is probably the most tenable, that you need a glorious coalition of conservatives, possibly in the Senate and hopefully in the Senate, to actually have that pulling effect that we're talking about and diminish this splintering of the vote. I mean, the DLP also held the balance of power in the Senate from time to time, and that had a significant effect, as well as, you've had leftist parties have balance of power as well. I mean, the Democrats held the balance of power in the Senate as well. So we need that glorious coalition of conservatives to pull together rather than splinter the vote and have that effect of pulling the Liberals back to their conservative base.
Rocco, I'm glad you called my theory. Gerard Henderson said I was nuts. I'm glad to have Rocco supporting my theory. Just very quickly before we go, Rocco, you've told us what ScoMo doesn't stand for. What is your sense of who Scott Morrison is?
What Scott Morrison is, he's definitely not a conservative, but it just depends which way the wind blows. That's what he is. And if that's what you want for another 3 years, well, again, I can't fathom that. But also another perspective on what he is, he's just someone who can't get out of bed quick enough to look at what the focus groups say. And that determines what he says for the day, that determines his line. It might get him some plaudits for a 24-hour news cycle, but it doesn't actually, I don't think, this time around, help you to actually maintain your base and win an election. Just one other thing before I go. It's a short book. It's not written in flowery academic language. It's a compendium of articles that were published in the Specky and the Quadrant, so it's an easy read for people.
Well, Rocco, I've got the focus group results here about your book. It says, don't buy this book, whatever you do. Oh, hang on, no, that's from Scott Morrison. Sorry, my mistake. Rocco, congratulations to you and Augusto on the book. And people can find that online and buy it. And thanks so much for coming on Outsiders. We'll speak again soon. There you go, Deconstructing ScoMo. Thanks, Rocco.